This report was done based on 2023 information for South Africa. And please, I've quoted the source where you can find this report. If this is of interest to you, the number of statistics and how they've delved down into various categories of information is quite interesting. And if that's your cup of tea, please go and have a look at it. I've just pulled out stats here that's relevant in terms of setting the scene for where we are. So if you look at South Africa, as at 2023, approximately 43.48 million internet users within our country. That translates to about 72.3% of our total population. Importantly, while that percentage may seem high, for perspective, it means that 16.6 million approximately of our population have not accessed the internet as at the start of 2023. If we look at other aspects such as cellular mobile connections, you'll see that on average, 112.7 million of our population have some form of cellular mobile connections. Please note before you question the stats, more often than not, individuals have more than one mobile connection. On average, according to Meltwater, at a minimum, there's 2 connections per person, usually one for business and one for personal. If you compare our internet users in South Africa to the global picture, you'll see in terms of those high-level percentages, we're actually doing pretty well. If you look at our active social media users, interestingly, whilst we have a strong presence, the number of users in South Africa is not as high as the global picture. Some more interesting stats to share with you, and I'll tell you why I'm sharing all of this. Again, this comes out of the Meltwater report that looks at digital usage across South Africa, and these are stats as of 2023. 61.3% visit of internet users, as in individuals between the ages of 16 to 64 years who engage in various digital activities, have visited their social networks to look for information about brands and products. 61.7% of internet users research brands online before making any sort of purchase. Collectively, all of us sitting here, if we say we fall into this average user, we spend 9 hours, 38 minutes daily across various devices utilizing the internet. So what does this all mean? Importantly, what picture does this paint for us as we move forward into discussions on this conference? Of course, we have the data tells us we have a very active population in terms of using various digital technologies and platforms. Theoretically, it's been shown theoretically it's been theorized rather, that the internet can drive economic development, both from the supply side as well as the demand side. There's quite a lot of empirical evidence that shows us that being digitally connected can actually improve a worker's productivity. For example, access to the internet has been found to help certain employees carry out tasks more rapidly and to a higher standard. On the demand side, having an internet connection and having some sort of online presence ensures that a seller is able to meet the needs of the buyer. There is growing evidence that technology also within certain African countries have benefited in terms of being able to provide on-the-job training, leading to this notion of upskilling. Colleagues, I now move on to the case of the public service sector. The presentation is informed by research that we've conducted. It may not paint a pretty picture, but taking what the minister has already indicated to us, this is where we're starting in terms of finding practical and implementable solutions. Government as the leader, government as the policymaker, and one of the largest employers within our country needs an urgent call to action. And this research that we've done or rather commissioned, is intended to ensure that we are able to find the correct partnerships and address the skills needs that have been identified. So we've had two specific research that we've commissioned as the PCETA. The first one looked at emerging technologies across the public service sector. And when I refer to the public service sector, I am talking about national government departments, provincial government departments, public entities, as well as the legislative sector. That's the mandate that falls within the PCETA. So the emerging technologies piece of research was mainly focused on gathering information and evidence on what technologies are being utilized within government departments, and then associating those with the skills required. The second piece of research, which is titled The Future Skills and Competencies for the Model Public Servant in the Public Service Sector, including an analysis of ICT skills, was twofold. First, we wanted to take stock of what are the ICT skills available within government. And here I'm not referring to consultants that are brought in to do a lot of the work, but rather the actual employees that are employed directly by government. And then secondly, what are the future, and that included digital skills that would be required, and note the word model. That was very intentional in terms of our use. So the second piece of research was conducted by the Tshwane University of Technologies Institute for the Future of Work. We had quite a wide collaboration in terms of this project with various key role players within the sector, including the Department of Public Service and Administration, who provided us with data, the National School of Government, who is a key arm of training within the public service, the Center for Public Service and Innovation, as well as DCTT. Colleagues, here are some key findings and recommendations. So what we've done is for presentation purposes, we've synthesized the findings and recommendations into 4 key areas. If we look at the aspect of learning and training, e-learning, whilst commonly mentioned, is something that still requires us to do quite a bit of work in terms of, one, being able to translate e-learning policy into tools. One of the recommendations that came out very strongly was to consider developing an e-learning ecosystem across public service and across the public sector, so that there are sufficient support networks in terms of encouraging public service officials to upskill. Second important component that came out under learning and training was the aspect of change management. I think, again, this is one of the themes that came out quite strongly in the minister's keynote address. We need to change the way public servants think about technology and how they approach it. If you are familiar with the area of public administration, one of the leading academics in this area is Professor Masavumule. And he shared with us what came out for some of the consultations with government officials. And it was the fact that government officials do not see technology as a key enabler for improving efficiencies and processes, but rather see it as an emerging trend that is taking place. So the translation of technology into how can you make my work better still requires change, still requires a paradigm shift. For example, aspects of artificial intelligence, robotics were mentioned. But when you look at the findings in terms of use within government, you'd see the comparisons quite low. Another area that came out as a key recommendation, and that's commonly mentioned here, is reskilling and upskilling. And I'd like to just, clarify these notions of reskilling and upskilling. When we talk about reskilling, we're talking about training an existing employee who has shown the aptitude for learning a completely new occupation. So, for example, we have general clerks, still quite prevalent across the public service sector. We will require these individuals soon to perform other tasks. How do we develop those individuals into, for example, a web developer? I'm not saying it's possible, but we never know. Whereas if we talk about aspects of upskilling, we're talking about providing training for those employees to learn new skills. We have grants that are being dispersed by government. How do we take an individual, a grants manager, who's used to working on Microsoft Excel, and taking them across to being able to administer grants using some sort of robotic process automation? So that's around learning and training. In terms of new ways of work, interestingly, what came out here again was the aspect of technology being used more for digitization of paper-powered processes or manual processes. Leadership and management was noted quite strongly in terms of their lack to lead this change and think about how we move and we work differently within government. An enabling environment, colleagues, I think we all recognize that we have regional disparities. In the public service sector is no different. You would have government departments that have really embraced and taken on technology. They've utilized this in their everyday service delivery of a public good, which is what government is supposed to be delivering. And then you have those who often do not even have a stable internet connection to join a meeting via Microsoft Teams. So we have this disparity, and therefore when we have policies or practices or training programs, for example, that are meant to be implemented across government, often the uptake and the participation is not standard across. And then finally, and I think in line with what's already been spoken about in this conference, partnerships. Something that was key, especially in the area of ICT skills, was that there's a lack of recognition of your private vendor certifications. I'm not a technical ICT person, but if you understand the education and training environment, qualifications are on the National Qualifications Framework. We have an entry requirement of having a National Qualifications Framework that's formally recognized by SAQA. How do we balance that with the private certifications that are not accredited by a quality council such as the QCTO? And that's where a partnership requirement has come out very strongly in terms of us as SETAs and us as government partnering with the QCTO, and then importantly, a skills system that looks at collaboration with both government and industry. Out of these two pieces of research, what we have developed is what we call a compendium of skills, as well as a framework for future ICT skills in the public service sector. So these have been developed by academics. The compendium is really intended to direct our implementation collectively, not only as a SETA. As I indicated, the SETA's role is to facilitate relevant skills development interventions. Colleagues, as I conclude, these are some of the key success factors that should be guiding our way forward. Earlier on, I said there's an urgent need for us to do something different when we talk about technology and skills within the public service sector. Importantly, any initiative to any sort of technological change must first be facilitated by addressing the precursors to reform. There needs to be intentional and specific efforts to adopt technology to improve service efficiency. It cannot be a by-the-way thing. If you work in government, colleagues, we have a lot of policies, reporting templates that we have to adhere to. So this needs to be not just another malicious compliance exercise, but rather a very intentional exercise if we are going to catch up and if we are going to take the opportunities that technology brings forward in terms of us operating as a public service sector. Leadership must have a balance between knowledge of the government ecosystem and faith in technological adaptation and innovation. I think the leadership that has spoken here has already indicated that. However, what we need is now seeing that filter down into departments in terms of actually trusting that if we employ a technology, it's going to make our business processes better, it's going to assist us with achieving our relevant mandates. There needs to be a shift in the traditional tendency to see a distinction between the public sector and the private sector, and reform initiatives with regards to digital skills requires a holistic approach. So we have to take our people, our processes, and technology simultaneously in order to ensure that that change management I referred to earlier and staff are actually buying in. Critically, one of the most important items that came up when we went back and listened to some of the interviews was the fear of a robot taking my job. Colleagues, I think we know we're very far away from that. So we're looking at aspects of technology assisting us and making us better in terms of this notion of a capable state. And that's where we need the staff buy-in. Hard skills and soft skills are key component ensuring that our staff embrace and are committed to ongoing training and development. And finally, we need to recognize the exponential opportunities in unlocking the value that technology brings government and the operations of government. Colleagues, as I conclude, that's our contact details. I sincerely hope that this presentation has provoked some thought in terms of how we can approach in terms of the issues around human capacity development within the public service sector, and furthermore, how we can approach it. The ask is big. Have no doubt about this. The ask is big, but it requires all of us to focus, collaborate, and cooperate for us to work together. Should you have any comments, thoughts, ideas, the desire to work more with the PCETA in terms of this work, please do contact us. All the research reports I've mentioned here are available on our website, and we'd welcome any engagement and comments on that. Program Director, thank you very much. That brings me to the end.
Thank you, Ms. Porter. Indeed, the work is clearly cut out for us. So I'm going to ask that we afford this session, particularly the conversations and the stats that Ms. Porter spoke to resonate with all of you and to give 5 minutes or so of the opportunity of asking questions. And whilst that is happening, then we can ask that the next panel discussion, our moderator alongside the panelists, start making their way to the front. So any questions to enable us to engage with the content that Ms. Porter shared with us? Ushers? Yes, ma'am. Thank you. The ushers coming along. Do you want to sit perhaps there so that then we can come here? Sure. Yeah, sure.
There we go. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. I'm not sure what the time is. Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to ask, in terms of the research reports that was done, when you did it, did you look at disaggregation in terms of women versus men in terms of the stats in the public service, as well as employees with disabilities? Were there any disaggregation, or was it just a looking at it from the perspective of public servants across the board, not with any disaggregation? The reason why I'm asking this is because it would be interesting to see if there is differences in approaches when it comes to employees with disabilities versus employees without disabilities, when it comes to female employees versus male employees in terms of the approach to utilizing technology, as well as if they are in leadership, their approach to embracing it, because what the two things that you mentioned in your presentation was, one was the fact that employees do not see technology as a enabler, they see it rather more as an emerging trend. And the second thing that you said was that leadership in public service are not really on board when it comes to taking up technology. So I just would like to know if there was any differences when it was males versus females, when it was employees with disabilities versus non-disabled employees. Thanks.
Can I go ahead? Okay. Ma'am, so in terms of the general findings, such as the leadership aspect, no, we didn't aggregate. We did a general engagement across all of government. We didn't specify in terms of gender demographics or disability. However, what we have disaggregated into age, gender, disability status was the ICT skill or ICT employees within government. And we have those stats available, but in terms of correlating those to the other set of findings, no, we don't have that. We didn't approach it in that way.
Can you hear me? Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Galit. I'm from Ripples for Change, working in rural communities. You spoke about access to internet and penetration of smartphones. Do you have any stats about rural communities?
Ma'am, the Meltwater report that I made reference to actually goes into quite a bit of detail, so I'd recommend that you just have a look at that. I didn't bring those stats out here for the purposes of this presentation, but those ones would be in that particular report.
There's a third question.
Knowledge, I fully support the technology movement, digital transformation. I guess I think we need to have a serious conversation around this question of, will it take away my job? We're starting to see in the GDP growth and employment growth that there is definitely a diminishing growth in jobs being created. So every time a Ford comes into the country and erects a new plant to make more vehicles, the reality is they bring in highly technical, capability, machinery, etc. So I think we need to, I think it is definitely taking away jobs. But at the same time, I think it's also creating new opportunities. My only concern is that I think we need to address the challenge of the skills that will help fulfill the new jobs that are to come, right? So we're seeing new jobs, experience design, innovators, etc., etc. It's just that we need to address the more highly skilled and technical jobs so people can fulfill the new jobs to come. So it's a yes or no answer. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we're 100% aligned on that.
A question from me is about reskilling. One of the issues with the policy was, as far as I remember, is that if you are applying for a course, the requirement would be that you apply for something within your line of work. Has there been a shift in policy to allow people to reskill themselves outside their current assignment or the area of work? That's the first question. Another one, we are aware that for you to do other courses, there are free courses that are available online that one can do. You cannot do that at work because you go to work in the office, you're supposed to do your work. You can do maybe when you're at home or you go somewhere. What is the government doing in enhancing wide availability of connectivity, free technology, free connectivity in our communities, in our areas? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm going to leave the last question to perhaps someone from government. Unfortunately, I can't answer that coming from the Public Service Education and Training Authority. Ma'am, with regards to your other question around funding, I think that's why the DPSA was such a critical partner in us us conducting this research, so that it would inform their policies in terms of funding interventions. I think it's important to note also that funding avenues are vast. Trevor comes from a CETA. CETAs are intended, amongst other things, to also fund training and development. So there's also those opportunities that are available. I was sharing with someone who was sitting next to me earlier on. There is an initiative called the Batipeli Digital Skills. That's a partnership between us as PCETA and Microsoft South Africa, which provides free digital skills for any public service employee to go on and gain those skills. Of course, they're online content, they're non-credit bearing, but those opportunities are there. And perhaps where we need to work towards is just sharing those opportunities so that they're more accessible. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Porter. With respect to the question that you said should ideally be answered by someone from the department, do we have someone from the department that would be able to answer the question with respect to what we are doing within the spaces of empowering and enabling access to all the digital assets that will make connectivity easier? Is there someone from the national department that can be able to answer that question? Or should I ask that we think of, okay, fantastic. I didn't want to ask them out. Thank you, DDG. Thank you so much.
No, thanks, Program Director. I think on that one, there's a couple of things that we're doing as a department. One of them being the SA Connect program. Minister did highlight on his speech, where we are trying to connect the communities because we see that there is a bit of market failure in terms of the players in the market. So we are trying to intervene there by connecting some of the communities. So that is one program that we're doing. But also the other one, we are working with the regulator, ICASA, in terms of understanding the cost to communicate, whereby we still see that the cost of data is still quite high. So we are looking on that, and because there's also a Competition Commission report, that also highlighted that the cost of data is still very high in South Africa. So that is a work that we're currently doing with our ICASA and the department in terms of unpacking and understanding exactly what are the costs. But we're also working with all the players in the market to make sure that we can all align and make sure that we deal with this thing, all of us. It's not like just something that the department is doing, but we're doing it with all the players involved. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And then the ma'am that asked about the meltwater report, anybody else that might be interested in it, I've got a copy of it. It's quite a 450-odd page. It's very thorough, very, very detailed, really speaks to the nuances of both demographic and also, to some extent, behavioral aspects of usage. In terms of internet, comparing it to the mobile usage as well, as opposed to using it on the computer. So it's quite thorough. I'll share it with you during lunchtime, and you can be able to take it forward. Thank you for that. Thank you for those questions. I think they're very, very helpful. They help us gear ourselves towards the outcomes at hand, which we need to reflect on. Once again, let's not forget that we are here because we are discussing the outcome that is intended to find alignment between skills development landscape and human capital development interventions for global competitiveness. Now, our next moderator, or our first moderator for this plenary session, really fits in quite perfectly with respect to the conversation at hand. He has more than 25 years of experience working in human capital management, education, and research. So he will enable us to identify practical nuances on how to get us to really move towards skills development for a digital economy. He's not alone. Mr. Trevor Ramitlwa, CEO of NAMISA, has got his 4 panelists, and I will allow him to do the introductions and kick off with the session at hand to move us forward in terms of understanding the skills development for a digital economy. Please, can you welcome them very, very powerfully? I think you can introduce them while seated. Yeah, thank you so much. We will get off. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I hope that I'm audible. Thank you. Am I audible? I think I'm audible. Thank you, Program Director, for the introduction. And I will just go straight into the purpose of our discussion, following very profound messages or speeches coming from our principals. Before doing that, also acknowledging our minister who's in our presence. We are very delighted to have you, Minister, in this discussion. And thanks to the Deputy Minister as well for showing your leadership all the time. Thank you for being present, as well as the MEC and the Honorable Acting Mayor. So, the conversation starts. And we would like to see, instead of having this as a talk shop, to really have a notion or an approach that we need to see some action. I was running a marathon shortly, Minister, the Joburg City Marathon. It was only 10 kilometers, and as we were running there was somebody chanting a slogan saying, "No walking in running shoes." So I think we should stop talking too much about what is happening, but rather do. Because we are in the channel now where things have to happen. We are in that space. And today our conversation is about enhancing the digital skills delivery ecosystem. It is there, it is existing. All that we need to do is to understand how it is, where is it at the moment, where are the gaps, and how do we enhance it so that we can profoundly build the movement that the minister referred to, and that we have a solid ecosystem, supported by partnerships that can comprehensively respond to the demands of the economy at the moment and in the future. And we need to do that in a timely action as well. Can you imagine how complex that is? If you look at the scale and the amount of work that we need to do and the various pieces of this puzzle, the ecosystem itself, and how it needs to pull together, that it be coordinated in a very good way, both in private sector and government and the communities. So with that, let me take this opportunity to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. I'm very chuffed today because we have 3 women. Oh, there's 3 men. I thought men were less. It's equal, it's 50-50. So, yeah, so the other one is sitting here, those of you who cannot see her. So, yeah, so I'll just take this opportunity to ask them to briefly introduce themselves. Shiva, we know you already. You're from the P-SETA, and we know that is one of the SETAs. So I'll just maybe move to my left and ask Nyari to introduce herself, just briefly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Am I audible? Yeah, okay. Nyari Samushonga, I'm the CEO of We Think Code, and we're a software development academy operating in Johannesburg, in Durban, and in Cape Town. And our work focuses on closing the digital skills gap, where South Africa finds itself with an unemployment problem where, as we've heard already, the digital sector has a lot of unfilled roles because people aren't skilled. So our work is centered around recruiting young people, and largely young people from communities that don't have access to digital training, training them in more expert skills in software development, and pathwaying them to economic participation so that we can close this digital skills gap and take advantage of this moment with 4IR.
Thank you. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's always difficult to introduce myself because I never know where to start based on the many hats and the roles that I have been lucky to occupy. But I'm here. First, my name is Dr. Sipho Sithole. I'm the Senior Research Fellow at the Johannesburg Institute for Advanced Study at University of Johannesburg. But my experience cuts across aviation, public transport, broadcasting, music, and as a scholar, I've also just published a book, a very interesting book. I will be sharing my experiences in the journey that I've occupied, particularly when I've been an HR director of some of the multinational corporations, on the challenges, which I will respond to your presentation. But before I ask you to move on, I just need to say to the engineers and the DJs that the music they have curated, we need to have a discussion. Because we are in the land of King Palo here, Aboma Dosini, Victor Ndazilwane. So when we step on stage, we want to hear the sound of the Eastern Cape. And I hope that at dinner, you're going to change the music. Otherwise, I'll give you a list.
Thank you. Thank you. Over to you, Nomso. Thank you for that, Doc. Over to you, Nomso.
Thank you so much, Trevor. Fortunately, I do not have any curated playlist. But my name is Nomso Kana, and I am the Chief Enablement Officer at SimSykes. And I am a nuclear scientist by trade who happens to be a rebellion who went into broadband infrastructure because I just have passion for connectivity as well as digital skills and just building an ecosystem that just works together. Over to you, Sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Over to you, Siliki.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I am Siliki Tlhabane. I'm the Chief Director from the Department of Basic Education, responsible for math, science, and technology curriculum, as well as ICTs in education. Our primary responsibility is to take care of the next generation of workers and prepare them for the responsibilities that lie ahead. They are in school uniforms right now,